The 1994 Rwandan genocide was a planned 100-day massacre from April to July. Extremists in Rwanda's majority, which is Hutu population, was planned the genocide. They wanted to exterminate Tutsis and anyone who against or opposed them. The violence killed over 800,000 civilians, mostly from Tutsis, and also they are moderate Hutus. Around 2 million Rwandans fled the country during and after the genocide.
So right now we're going to discuss three causes of why the Rwandan genocide happened, which is the first one is the denial of the rights of the Tutsis refugees to return to their homeland, and the second one is the Belgian colonial rule that denied the political power and the educations to the Hutus, and the last one will be about the assassinations of Rwandan president. The first causes of why the genocide in the Rwandan happened is because of the denial of the right of the Tutsis refugees to return to their homeland. So after hearing about the violence that happening in Rwanda, a lot of Tutsis people left the country in 1959 and went to Uganda, Burundi, and also the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which are all close by the Rwanda. So after that, the government of the 1990s wouldn't do anything about the problem of the refugees. So there are some of the refugees asked the president during that time, which is the Juvenal Habyarimana, to let them go back to their home country, but he basically didn't listen to them because they are the refugee. So he would not let them go back and saying that the Rwanda was already too crowded and they didn't have enough land or food for them, and they need to focus more on the people who are already in the Rwanda. So President Habyarimana actually, the claims that being made by the president was actually false. There was enough food, enough free space to accommodate the refugee back into their homeland. So the argument of the overpopulation in this case was not relevant. So in response, a group of young refugees grouped into the Rwandan Patriotic Front, or we call it as a RPF, decided to come back by force. So, supported by the moderate Hutus, they launched a protracted liberalizations war on the October 1st, 1990s. So the second causes of why the Rwandan genocide happened is because of the Belgian colonial rule that denied the political power and the educations to the Hutu people. So this preferential treatment is create the social hierarchy that marginalize the Hutu majority, and they also deny them the significant political power and the educational opportunities. So the Belgians' reinforcement of these divisions sowed the seeds of resentment and the inequality that would fester long after the Rwanda's independence in 1962. So they basically more to the Tutsi side, and they gave the political power and also the educations to the minority of the Tutsis people. And the culminations of these tensions and the historical grievances of the Hutu majority eventually led to the horrified violence of the Rwandan genocide. So it is important to note that while Belgian colonial rule contributed to the significantly to the ethnic tensions, the genocide was the result of multiple factors, including the political, economic, and also the social pressures that built up over the decades. The last one is the assassinations of the Rwandan president. The genocide was sparked by the death of the Rwandan president Juvenal Habyarimana, he is a Hutu, when his plane was shot down above the Kigali airport on 6 April 1994. President was killed because he was a Hutu and there was a segregation in the government after Rwanda became independent. The Hutu people didn't want any Tutsis to work in the government, which led to the president's death and the killing of the Tutsis people by the Hutu people who wanted a revenge. The Tutsis people were identified by their national ID cards, which showing that what tribes they were from. A French judge had blamed the current Rwandan president Paul Kagame. At the time, he is the leader of the Tutsis rebel group and some of his close associates for carrying out the rocket attack. Mr. Kagame firmly denies this and said that it was the work of Hutu extremists in order to provide a pretext to carry out their well-laid plans to exterminate the Tutsi community. The assassinations led to an immediate reaction, with the genocide beginning within an hours. Extremist Hutu factions initiate a campaign of violence against Tutsis and moderate Hutus, leading to the death of over 800,000 of people.
The first one is the mass killing. Following the assassination of Rwanda president on April 6, 1994, extremist Hutu military groups known as the Interahamwe and the Hutu civilians, incited by government and media propaganda, began a systematic campaign of violence against Tutsis and moderate Hutus. This campaign was characterized by a series of brutal and coordinated attacks, but that resulted in the death of hundreds of thousands of people. The Interahamwe can be translated also to those who work or fight together, was initially a small youth wing of the Hutu ruling party known as the National Republican Movement for Democracy and Development, MRND. However, as the violence escalated during the Rwandan Civil War, the definition of the Interahamwe expanded to include almost anyone who was engaged in the active killing in Rwandan Tutsis regardless of their membership with the MRND. The Interahamwe, along with other Hutu extremist groups, set up roadblocks throughout the country and identified individuals based on their ethnicity. Those identified as Tutsis or moderate Hutus were then killed using a variety of methods such as matches, clubs, or firearms. Many victims were also tortured and mutilated before being killed. The brutality of these attacks was further exacerbated by the fact that many victims working in public spaces such as roads, markets, and churches, and that their bodies were often left in mass graves or rivers. The next one is the role of the media. This is also one of the major events that happened in Rwandan genocide. Particularly, radio stations like Radio Television Libre de Mille Collines (RTLM) was crucial in inciting and fueling the Rwandan genocide against the Tutsi population. RTLM was a Rwandan radio station that operated from July 1993 to July 1994. It played a significant and direct role in the genocide through its broadcasts, like RTLM projected hate propaganda against Tutsis, moderate Hutus, Belgians, and the UN peacekeeping mission, UNAMIR. It described Tutsis as cockroaches that needed to be eliminated. Next is, the station also broadcasts were widely listened to by the general population and were used to create an atmosphere of charged racial hostility and that enabled the genocide to occur. Other than that, RTLM broadcast also complemented mandatory community meetings called Umuganda, where Hutus were mobilized and incited to violence against Tutsis. The radio station was described as the soundtrack to the genocide. Some of the most notorious RTLM broadcasts directly urged Hutus to go back there and finish them off, and that the graves are not yet full, referring to the need to kill more Tutsis. Scholars have described RTLM as a de facto arm of the Hutu government and its broadcasts as radio genocide and death by radio. The station's role in inciting the violence was a significant that attempts were made to prosecute its broadcasts for incitement to genocide, though this proved challenging due to free speech issues. The media's role in the Rwanda genocide, particularly the hate-filled broadcast of RTLM, demonstrates how powerful and dangerous the manipulation of information can be, especially in times of conflict and ethnic tensions. The failure to adequately address or counter this hate speech contributed to the scale and brutality of the genocide. The last one major event is the end of the Rwanda genocide. The Rwandan genocide ended in mid-July 1994 when the Rwandan Patriotic Front (RPF), led by Paul Kagame, captured the capital city of Kigali and established control over the country. This marked the end of the 100-day period of mass killings that had begun on April 7, 1994, following the assassination of Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana and Burundian President Cyprien Ntaryamira. The RPF advance was a significant turning point in the conflict. By mid-June, they had surrounded Kigali, and on July 4, they seized the city, marking the end of the genocide and the civil war. The RPF's victory was a result of their strategic military campaigns, which include encircling the capitals and cutting off their what we call supply routes, as well as their ability to exploit the Rwandan army's focus on the genocide rather than fight for Kigali. The end of the genocide led to a mass exodus of Hutus, fearing retribution from the RPF into neighboring countries. This exodus was massive, with hundreds of thousands of Hutus fleeing Rwanda in the space of a few days. By the end of July 1994, around 2 million Rwandans, including both those responsible for the genocide and civilians fearful of reprisals, had fled the country, mostly to neighboring Zaire and Tanzania. The mass exodus was characterized by extreme hardship and suffering. Many refugees were forced to live in overcrowded and unsanitary conditions, leading to the spread of diseases such as cholera and dysentery. The lack of adequate food, water, and medical care resulted in high death rates, particularly among children and the elderly. The RPF's victory and the end of the genocide marked a significant turning point in Rwandan history. The RPF established a new government, and efforts were made to rebuild and develop the country. However, the legacy of the genocide continued to have a profound impact on Rwanda society, with many survivors still struggling to come to terms with the trauma they experienced. Now, the next one is about the main actors that involved in Rwandan genocide. The first one is extremist Hutu leaders. The extremist Hutu leaders were a group of hardline Hutu politicians who were opposed to the Arusha Accords, a peace agreement signed in August 1993 that aimed to end the Rwandan civil war, and by establishing a broad-based transitional government. These leaders believed that the accords would lead to the loss of Hutu power and dominance in Rwanda. The extremist Hutu leaders orchestrated the assassination of President Rwanda on April 6, 1994, which provided the opportunity to launch a genocide against the Tutsi minority and moderate Hutus. They launched a vicious propaganda campaign against the Tutsis, portraying them as a threat to Hutu power and identity. This campaign was amplified by radio broadcasts, which called for the killing of Tutsis and moderate Hutus. The extremist Hutus leader armed Hutu paramilitary force known as the Interahamwe, which were responsible for the majority of the killing during the genocide. The extremist Hutu leaders directed the genocide, providing strategic guidance and coordinating the efforts of the Interahamwe and other Hutu military groups also. And furthermore, they also targeted moderate Hutu leaders who might have opposed the genocide. The next main actors that involved in Rwanda genocide is international community. There is 3 international community, which is United Nations. United Nations Assistance Mission for Rwanda, or what we call UNAMIR, led by Canadian General Romeo Blair. This community was the peacekeeping force in Rwanda at that time. Despite efforts to protect civilians, the mission was severely limited by a lack of resources and restrictive mandates imposed by the UN Security Council. The UN Secretary General during the genocide also criticized for the UN's inadequate response. The second international community is major powers and international actors, such as the United States, France, Belgium, and other major powers also have been criticized for their failure to intervene and prevent the genocide. Despite evidence of mass killings, these countries were reluctant to commit resources or support a robust intervention. The last international community is non-governmental organizations, or what we call NGOs. Various NGOs and humanitarian organizations were active in Rwanda, providing aid and documenting the atrocities. However, their ability to stop the killings was limited. The Rwandan Patriotic Front, or known as RPF, also the main actors in Rwandan genocide. The RPF was a rebel group formed in 1987 by Rwandan Tutsi refugees who had fled to Uganda after the 1959 Rwanda Revolution. The group's primary goal was to overthrow the Rwandan government and establish a Tutsi-dominated government. The RPF launched a military campaign against the Rwandan government in October 1990, which led to the outbreak of the Rwandan Civil War. The RPF's military campaigns were characterized by brutal tactics, including the use of landmines, ambush, and massacres of civilians. On July 4, 1994, the RPF captured the capital city of Kigali, marking the end of the genocide and the civil war. Like I mentioned before the previous slide, the RPF's victory was a result of the strategic military campaign and the collapse of the Rwandan army. The RPF was also responsible for perpetrating violence against Hutu civilians, particularly in the aftermath of the genocide. This included the killing of Hutu civilians, the destruction of their homes, and the forced displacement of thousands of people. The last one is victims. Victims also was the main actors in Rwanda genocide. Many Rwandans, particularly Tutsis and moderate Hutus, were forced to flee their homes and seek shelter in churches, schools, and other safe zones. These survivors were often forced to live in extreme conditions with limited access to food, water, and medical care. They were also frequently targeted by the genocidaires who sought to eliminate them. A significant number of Rwandans, including both of Hutus and Tutsis, risked their lives to protect others during the genocide. These rescuers, often referred to as hidden children, hid and protected Tutsis and moderate Hutus from the genocide. The rescuers play a crucial role in saving lives and providing support to those in need. Women, particularly those who were not directly involved in the violence, were often targeted by genociders. They were subjected to sexual violence, forced into marriage, and forced to flee their home. Women also played a significant role in the genocide, with some participating in the violence and others hiding and protecting those targeted. The Rwandan genocide had a profound psychological impact on these victims. Many survivors continue to struggle with trauma, anxiety, and depression, and the memories of the genocide continue haunt them.
The Rwanda genocide, often referred as Rugahundi, was a series of massacres carried out in Zimbabwe between 1983 until 1987. The violence targeted the Ndebele ethnic group in the Matabeleland and Mainlands provinces. Here are the key roles in the context of ethnicity during the Rwanda genocide. The first one, we're looking at the ZANU-PF government. So this type is led by Prime Minister Robert Mugabe, the Zimbabwe African National Union Patriotic Front, or we call it ZANU-PF. So Mugabe administration view the Ndebele as a potential supporter of the Zimbabwe Africa People Union, or we call ZAPU, led by Joshua Nkomo, a political rival. Second one, we look to the next role is 5th Brigade. So 5th Brigade, or we call as North Korea trained unit, specifically deployed to suppress disease in Matabeleland. So the 5th Brigade was directly involved in the massacres, which included mass killing, torture, and widespread human rights abuse against the Ndebele. Next, we look to Ndebele. So the Ndebele is the primary victim of the Rugahundi massacres. So the Ndebele people were targeted due to their perceived support to ZAPU and historical grievance against the Shona-dominated government. However, international and domestic response in this issue is the first one. We look to international community. So the international community respond to global, Togo-Kahundi issues was largely mute, with few international actors taking significant steps to intervene or hold the Zimbabwe government accountable during the height of atrocities. So the second one, we look to domestic actor. So within Zimbabwe, voices from civil society, religion organization, and human rights group attempt to bring attention to their story to their fees significantly represent from the government. So in this context of the I can conclude that Gukuhundi lasting scars of Zimbabwe ethnic relation with deep-seated mistrust between the Sona and Ndebele communities. So it also set a precedence for the use of state violence in maintaining political power, influencing Zimbabwe political landscape for decades. So
The attempted resolutions by the Rwandan genocide is the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, or we can call it as ICTR. So it was established by the United Nations Security Council in November 1994 in the aftermath of the genocide. So the headquarters are situated in the city of Arusha, which is located in the Tanzania. The International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda was primarily concerned with the indicting and prosecuting high-level individuals who were responsible for the genocide. These individuals included high-ranking officials in the government and military, also the politicians, businessmen, religious, and also media leaders. It lasted until the 31st of December in 2015. During the year 1994, a total of 93 individuals were indicted for committing genocide as well as other serious violations of international humanitarian law. Out of these, 8 individuals are still considered to be on run and wanted. The United Nations mechanism for the International Criminal Tribunal is still working to locate these individuals. A conviction for genocide and crimes against the humanity was handed down by the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda in the year 1998. Due to the fact that the term genocide had not yet been established as a crime at the time of the Holocaust, this was the very first time that an international court has ever issued a verdict for a crime of genocide. A precedent was established by his convictions, which established that rape is a crime of genocide as well as a war crimes. As the year progressed, Jean Kambanda, who has been serving as a prime minister during the genocide, entered a guilty plea to the charge of genocide. He is the only head of the government to ever be found guilty of the genocide. In Mali, he is currently serving a sentence of life in prison. Second one is the Gacaca Court. Due to the nature of the genocide, alongside those in power, hundreds of thousands civilians were also guilty of crimes including murder and rape committed during the genocide. In 2005, the Rwandan government re-established a traditional community court system called Gacaca, or we can call it as a Gacaca Court. 1,200 community courts across the country with local village elders acting as judges heard the cases of nearly 2 million people accused of genocide-related crimes. Perpetrators were given the opportunity to confess their crimes, and many victims learned the truth about the death of their family members through this trial. The accused were often given the lower sentences if they showed remorse and asked for forgiveness in front of their community. Many who took part in Gacaca court say this court paved the way for reconciliations among Rwandans. Although some survivors has criticized this system, and there are some human rights concerns that the accused did not face a fair trial. Gacaca was one of the world's most extensive post-conflict justice system and completed its work in 2012.
The mass killing in Kigali spread from that city to the rest of Rwanda in the first 2 weeks. Local administration in central and southern Rwanda were mostly lived, and they resisted the genocide. After April 18, national officials removed the resistors that killed several of them. Other opponents then fell silent or actively led the killings. Officially rewarded killers with food, drinks, drugs, and money. Government-sponsored radio station started calling on ordinary Rwandan civilians to murder their neighbor. Within 3 months, some 800,000 people had been slaughtered. Meanwhile, the RPF resumed fighting, and civil war raged alongside the genocide. By early July, RPF forces had gained control over most of country, including Kigali. In response, more than 2 million people, nearly all Hutus, flew to Rwanda, crowding into refugee camps in the Congo, and back then they called it Zaire, and other neighbors' country. In the years following the genocide, efforts were made to assist Rwandan refugees to returning home. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees (UNHCR) played a crucial role in facilitating repatriation. Hundreds of thousands of Rwandans returning home, often with UNHCR assistance. By 2003, more than 22,700 refugees were returning home, and plans were in place to help 40,000 out of 60,000 refugees still in the region in that repatriate in that year. This include approximately around 80,000 refugees in Uganda. The Democratic Republic of Congo (DRC) has suffered complicated and long-lasting consequences from the Rwandan genocide in 1994. Tensions inside Congolese Tutsi communities resulted from the genocide. This covered the Banyarwanda in North Kivu and the Banyamulenge in South Kivu, both areas from Rwanda and Burundi. The International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda (ICTR) they played a crucial role in prosecuting those responsible for the genocide. It issued groundbreaking judgment that significantly impacted the evolution of international law. Notably, it was the first tribunal to convict individuals for rape and sexual violence as a form of genocide. And in the face of RPF's rapid advance, they limited their intervention to a humanitarian zone set up in southwestern Rwanda, saving tens of thousands of Tutsi lives, but also they're helping some of the genocide plotters to escape. In the aftermath of the Rwanda genocide, many prominent figures in the international community they lamented the atrocities from taking place. As former UN Secretary General Rosli, he told the PBS News in Frontline program, he said that the failure of Rwanda is 10 times greater than the Yugoslavia. It is because in Yugoslavia, the international community was interested with that issues, whereas the Rwanda genocide, no one interested and no one involved. In Rwanda, nobody was interested by that. A time was later made to rectify the passivity. After the RPF victory, the UNAMIR operation was brought back up to strength. It remained in Rwanda until March 1996 as one of the largest humanitarian relief in history. Establishment of R2P, the Rwandan genocide, showed the international community's bystander status. In response, the R2P principle requires states to defend all population from genocide, ethnic cleansing, mass atrocities, and it is considered one of the most important international norms since the Genocide Convention. Essentially, the genocide where occurred in Rwanda was the impetus for a massive refugee crisis that affected not only in Rwanda but also its neighbor. The midst of a turbulent period in human history, the resiliency of those who survive continues to serve as a beacon of hope.